Oh, good morning to everybody. Just getting started this morning, Sunday morning, of course. Last week we gathered outside for Earth Day. And so as people start arriving today, I want to use some of the reflections from that Earth Day experience as a part of our kind of centering time this morning. But delighted that you're here and a part of this experience. You know, as many of you know now, we're kind of committed again for another month of entering into sheltering in place. And I kind of knew that would be coming, but it's not without some level of tension, isn't it? I mean, we're all having this sort of dynamic playing out right now where we're both required to extend the shelter in place for another month. So we'll be doing this together now for the month of May. And at the same time, there's this urgency in our culture, and for good reason, to try to re-engage, right? To start our economy back up, to begin to see if there's ways we can be connected one to another with some social distancing. So we're living in this moment of tension where together, you and I will continue to shelter in place here in California, and at the same time, try to figure out ways to re-engage back into the social fabric. So as we do this again this morning, my invitation to you is to say good morning to each other and to connect to one another. It's the one way we can kind of build a cyber community together here in my living room as I shelter in place with Lori and small family around here. This is sort of our frontier. And at the same time, trying to figure out ways to re-engage. I think one of the challenges that I wanted to kind of explore today as well is that while there's going to be some urgency to figure out ways to come back together, how do we also begin to kind of apply, if you will, an urgency to also reimagining new ways that we come back together when society begins to open back up again? That's been part of our conversation as I've kind of explored what it might mean to think of this time as a hero's journey, a way to explore some uncharted territory together, to be attentive to the way in which we see what's broken in society, and at the same time, what we value the most, and carry that with us into the future. So this morning, I want to explore that a little bit, kind of unpack some of the wisdom from a couple different traditions and a story to think about how we can continue this hero's journey that we're on together. So like most mornings when we gather together, I want to start with a centering piece and to invite us to kind of let our heartbeat, slow down a little bit, find our grounding place as we kind of open up our heart and soul to some both ancient wisdom and the current issues of the day to give us some kind of way to orient as we move forward. And this morning, I thought the best way to kind of center ourselves would be to pick up on some of the reflections that you shared last week. So when we were together for Earth Day, I asked you to think about how Earth is showing up for you given this situation that we're all in. And I thought the reflections were just beautiful. So take a deep breath for a moment and just maybe focus in on the outdoors or quiet yourself for just a moment. And let me just read some of the reflections that were shared during the Earth Day last week, kind of as a way to provide maybe some imagination, some wisdom about how we should move forward as we move from this time of being solely isolated to trying to figure out how we are to be community together again. So some words of wisdom that you shared from last week. People seem to be ignoring ideological differences and learning how to care for one another. I'm loving the sound of the birds. I'm noticing the lengthening of days, slowly and steadily. The realness of us all together. I'm loving the animals that are venturing into areas that are usually overrun by humans. It's a good reminder that maybe we're taking too much space from the whole. We are capable of returning more space and cleanliness to our collective home. Less human noise. Going slow, it seems to open the door for so much for us to move through and into. I've noticed on the days that I'm working remotely, glued to a screen most of the day, that I only feel whole and well when I take the time to go outdoors to enjoy my garden, my hens, and the clean air. Looking at a mourning dove nestling in a hanging basket outside my patio. We are walking all the time, enjoying being outdoors and dreaming of future hikes to explore the wilds of California. I pass trees on my walk that are so much bigger than me, and I feel as if we are one. And then finally, all of nature just is. I'm noticing a call to just be. Aren't those beautiful? All reflections of that attitude of I am listening, world. Tell me what I need to hear. May the calm and peace and joy and insight and wisdom that you collectively shared last week be a guiding principle for us this morning as we spend some time reflecting. So welcome. It's good to take a deep breath, isn't it? In the midst of all the craziness that we have to navigate these days, and just be present together as a little community on this live stream, but for the next few minutes today. I'm hoping that that experience that we have together just gives you some way to navigate the next few weeks as we strive to both shelter in place and kind of re-engage in our society life together. I wanted to take a couple minutes today to kind of reflect on, that idea of the hero's journey that we had talked about. And that hero's journey that I've posted, if you want to re-look at it again, it's in the feed, is really a quest. It's a quest that you and I are on, whether we like it or not, into uncharted territory. A hero's journey is never just a return home again. It's not leaving so you can return home, but rather it is finding a way to allow the experiences that we open our hearts and our souls and our bodies up to transform home, so home becomes a different place for us. Hopefully a more vibrant place, a place that is reflective of the wisdom gained along the journey. And that is the hero's journey. It is an attempt to bring back to home a new sense of values and what's important. In some ways, I think we are, whether we like it or not, on this quest together. A hero's journey is always taken by people who are not just prophets, who are not just saying what needs to change, but those who journey are willing to venture in some ways into that new territory long enough that it can kind of manifest itself in their new sense of home. It's like giving yourself to it enough so that change becomes possible, that the transformation does take place. So it's not just about saying, here's what we need to do, but it's trying to live into that in a way that begins to embody it. And that's, I think, the real challenge for those who are on such a quest like we're on today. And so I wanted to think about that. When you when you take out on a quest like that, you realize, just like we are in this time, what is broken in a way that we know those things need to be let go of because they're truly non-sustainable for the long haul. I know together we're experiencing some of those things. And what can we loosen our grip on and let go of so we don't bring those back home with us? So that's one thing to think about as we take on this quest. And then, what do we want to embrace? What did we find along the way that's so important that we want to carry back home with us? And how do we integrate the wisdom learned along the journey into the way forward? Those are all the things we want to think about as we kind of take this journey ourselves. And in some ways, I want to remind us that it's not like, like we're superheroes to make this happen. And none of us, I don't think, would have chosen this situation that we're in. We were invited into it. We were thrust into it. I did not choose to live with the degree of anxiety I've been living with because I think things needed to change. It just happened, and here we are. So because we're not really all that heroic, it's more of a common quest, a global quest that we have to learn how to navigate. So what are some of the lessons that we can gain from our own, religious traditions or our own experiences in life that can help us navigate this frontier? So today I picked up on one of the themes that came out of the John text that was used today around churches around the world. And in John's text, it's the early community it's one of the later gospels, so it's the early community trying to figure out how to live into this Christ way. And as they do, they come up with all sorts of ideas and metaphors for how Christ community can function in their time. And of course, they're trying to build on the teachings of Jesus and the way in which he lived his life, but they're really trying to integrate that into the way in which they're living their lives. In fact, if you think about it, John's gospel is not really about the life of Jesus. It's about your life. It's about my life, how we live as one into this kind of Christ consciousness. That's really what that gospel's all about. And so the character of that journey, in a sense, is wrapped around all of these different metaphors. And one of the metaphors, of course, is this idea that the Christ serves as shepherd. You've maybe heard the term the Good Shepherd. In John chapter 10, really this Christ way is seen not necessarily as only being a guiding shepherd, but Jesus identifies as the shepherd's gate. The shepherd's gate. The Christ is, or the image of the Christ for John, is this sense of a gateway between a place of shelter that protects and cares for and tends to the sheep, and a gate that leads out into unknown territory, into exploration, into new experiences, into a seeking or a finding ways that haven't been traversed before. It turns out that the gateway is this kind of image that embodies all that is sacred. The sacred isn't just a place of security. The sacred isn't an adventure into the wild alone. It is a movement between those two places, a sense of being able to be nurtured, to have a sense of calm and peace, and the courage to move out and to explore new territory and to take risks and to find discoveries that you've never found before. It is this movement back and forth that is the invitation of all that is sacred. I just find that fascinating, that it's not really about stability at all or something solid. It is more about a flow between finding your sense of confidence and courage and strength, by being nurtured and then moving out into frontier to see what you might experience into places that have been uncharted, and then bringing that back. That back and forth is really the hero's journey that I want to think about today. It's not just about leaving everything behind and taking off. It's about a balance of both. Sometimes I think about it this way. When I was younger, and you remember I was younger at one time, so were you probably, right? When I was younger, my parents were interested in making sure we all knew how to swim. And so in those days, I don't know why they did this, but my mom would drop us off in Scotts Valley in California in a place called Polly's Puddle. And I can tell you that was uncharted territory for me as a young child. Being dropped off and having to navigate Polly's Puddle on my own as a young child, trying to learn how to swim, was the most traumatic experience of my little childhood to date, was learning how to navigate water, right? It was just so full of stress. Now, of course, I did learn how to swim, and of course, it was just the way we did it at the time. But there was something missing in that experience that I did notice when, as a grandfather, I watched my daughter go with her kids to the pool to teach them how to swim. And there was a dynamic that took place as I watched that reminded me of this kind of image of the gate, right? That the best way to think about a journey into the unknown is this capacity to have the invitation for adventure and the invitation for comfort kind of coming together at the same time. Because as I watched my grandchild learn how to swim with my daughter in the pool, that child would always go back and forth between venturing out into uncharted territory in the waters with the teacher or the guide, and then when overcome by fear and anxiety, returning back to mom and being held for a couple minutes, letting his little body calm down, feel the comfort and the embrace of mother, gaining courage, and then moving through the gateway into uncharted territory again. That's the invitation I would kind of ask you to explore today. To think about for yourself in this time, what is on each side of that gateway for you? Where are the places of solace, of comfort, of security, of home, of rejuvenation for you? And to make sure that during this time of transition, you know how to spend time there so that you have this capability, this courage, this strength, this inner centering to be able to move out into the new frontier that we collectively will share, that we call what will tomorrow look like, right? Where are we going as a people? And how will we take this new sense of who we might be as a people out into that territory and to discover new ways of being together, new ways of structuring community that are more equitable, that distributed goods and resources in ways that maybe we weren't doing before, that pay attention to each other's health and well-being in a new way. How do we do all that? Well, we do it by moving through that gateway back and forth, like breathing, like breathing. It's really no wonder that the early Christian communities understood this sense of the Christ, this permeable space that allowed them to move in and out of the social fabric of their day, to take on the challenges and also to nurture their inner sense of peace and wholeness. They said, in that we find our way to live, to move, and to have our being. Isn't that beautiful? Like a big old swimming lesson. A big old swimming lesson. How to live, how to move, and how to find our being. My hope for you and for me during this time is that we are able to both acknowledge that we are on a global quest into maybe a new tomorrow. And at the same time, we find this capacity to harmonize our lives to that quest by knowing what brings us the greatest peace and centering, and to have the courage to enter into the challenge. A challenge that will confront us both individually, in local communities, in our nation state, and globally, environmentally, cosmically, whatever it happens to be, right? We need to do this together. So let's do it well. So my challenge for you today, and I invited you to think about getting a piece of paper and a pen, and to use a blank piece of paper today for a moment before we do our sharing. And on one side of the paper, I want you to just take a minute and think about what are the kind of experiences that you know you need in your life that give you that true sense of centering, of being like in mom's arms, of feeling comfort and peace that are rejuvenating to you. So I want you to just take a minute and jot that down on one side of the paper. And on the other side, I want you to think about how does that benefit you? What feelings does it bring up for you? What does it offer you when you're in that experience? And once you've done that, then if you're brave enough, because this is Facebook Live, right? So it's a public forum. If you're brave enough to just share some of your insights on either side of the card. And so while you work on that, I'm going to have a couple of sips of coffee, and then I'll share mine publicly and invite you, if you want, to share with one another so you can learn from one another. And then next week, for those who were willing to share, I'll spend some time sharing those reflections with you, and then beginning to think about, once we understand that, how do we then, next week, identify the places that are calling us to be courageous, calling us to adventure in with new eyes, new insight into uncharted territory? How do we scope out the landscape that might pull us as individuals into new frontier, but not without knowing where we need to return to periodically for the resources we need for the adventure we share? Okay, hopefully you understand that. I don't see you nodding. I assume you do. Take a minute to do that on your card, and then I'll ask you to do some sharing together. And I'll have a drink of coffee while you do that. And enjoy the fire. I know quiet time on Facebook Live is not necessarily advised, but that's the way we're doing it this morning. Let me share with you kind of my two that I came up with as I thought about what I would put on the card. And hopefully you have, if you feel comfortable, to make sure on this live feed this morning, you're able to share some of your thoughts as well, so others can glean the wisdom that you bring to this hero's journey that we're on. So for me, when I thought about what brings me the greatest sense of kind of inner calm, and it's sort of unique for me, I think. I don't know that I would have articulated this years ago, but it's really, I find that when I can get together with just a small group of kind of creatives, right? People who are willing to be thoughtful about their life, a little bit vulnerable about their life, are willing to share intimately about kind of what's going on for them. somehow that kind of quiet, intimate experience with a few people, a small group of people usually, tends to kind of settle my soul down a little bit. It reminds me about kind of what's important and how my soul can be nourished by the wisdom of others, and that I'm not alone, that I'm a part of kind of the human family that I know is experiencing the same kind of thing I am. That little moment in time, and I've had a lot of those moments literally in this little setting here. But I know that space for me is that's like nurturing space for me. That's like that swimming pool that I know I gotta venture out into new territory. At the same time, I know I'm held by a little community that knows me closely and my worries and my hopes and my dreams. That balancing act for me is a deeply sacred thing. It is the image of the gateway for me. And what does that provide me? I think it gives me enough kind of like new insights, ways of thinking about the world, a lens that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't listened to another share from their perspective. It gives me some wiggle room, some more tools to be able to navigate the future. It gives me greater like flexibility because I know it's just not my trajectory, it's a collective trajectory. All that comes out of that kind of a conversation. I need to move into those spaces, I know I do, in order to move into new frontier. So for me, that's sort of my, or at least one of the places where I find the greatest sense of solace or nurturing, so that I'm prepared for the new frontier, the journey, the hero's journey that I am on for my life. Hopefully, as you've taken some time, you've been able to kind of craft that language for yourself. And I would invite you this week, if you either did that project while I was sipping on my coffee or you're going to work on that after we're done, just to leave that card on the table or the place where you watch this video next week, because we'll use some of that to talk about how to move into the quest. How do we use the resources from that nurturing place to give us a sense of how and where to go with our own personal energy into what's in front of us? All right, so that's what we'll do next week. So thanks for taking the time to, do this with me today. Like I said, I don't want to get together and do a big worship service every Sunday. There's other churches that are doing that. So if you need that kind of fix, there's plenty of that to go out and find. But for me, I think just in a way, hanging out with you and doing this is kind of selfishly my place of rest, where I get fed so I can move forward. So I appreciate the time that we can share together. So one more month of a little bit of pause. And my guess is things will begin to get a little crazier as we try to re-engage the social fabric. So this is an important month, the month of May, to maybe be as intentional as we can about the skills we need to be able to re-engage in meaningful ways. I'm going to lean into that this month, and I'm going to invite you to lean into it with me. All right? So today, as I close, I want to do a little blessing for you. It's a blessing that is based on the song called The Prayer. And rather than having an announcement time today, I'm going to invite you to let this blessing be yours as you move into your own new frontier. And then Martin Morley, the music director and worship leader at Our Savior's Lutheran Church, I put a post to his Facebook feed in which he plays this tune for you. So maybe let this blessing be a closing piece for you, and then silently or quietly open up the YouTube link and let Martin play the music for you, and let this blessing linger for you as that music plays. May all that guides us through this time help us to be wise in times when we don't know. And when we lose our way, guide us with grace to a place where we may be safe. A world where pain and sorrow will be ended, and every broken heart will be mended. A world where all of life learns to live as one. Amen. Enjoy the beauty of this day. Thanks for taking the time, for hanging out for 30, 40 minutes with me. I hope that this time together just simply serves as another touch point as you are invited into the adventure, and it is an adventure that is ahead. Blessings.